All right, so here we are in Substance Designer, taking a look at the finished result. So we are going to go through making the height map or the normal map for this sidewall texture. And let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so an overview here, just at a higher level, is I've got my sections broken out. So here's our reference. And I wanted to create this in a way that we could scale this and modify this for other use cases, whether it be a completely different tire or a different sidewall height. So for instance, this tire comes in a 20 inch and an 18 inch, and that's got a different sidewall profile. So we've got three elements here. We've got the outer rings and the outer text. We've got the center text and graphics, like here and here. And then we have the inner rings and the inner text. Okay, and this way I can scale these, move them in and out to fit different UVs or different sidewall textures. So let's start to break it down. All right, so the first thing we're going to go over is the large text here. So we start with the SP Sport Max. Basically, I've got SP Sport here and Max separate. If we take a look at them combined, the SP Sport is italicized, and to do that, I used a skew grayscale. Okay, so the skew, we can go ahead and skew that in either direction to get that italicized look. We blend these two together with an add linear dodge. Because it's add, the foreground and the backgrounds don't really matter. If those were flipped, we'd get the exact same result. So next, I've got a transform here. And on this transform, I had to mirror it horizontally and vertically. Otherwise, the text would be essentially upside down and backwards for our result. Next, we get this to go around the ring here using a Cartesian to polar. So one thing to note about the Cartesian to polar is we have our text here, and if I just grab the text, we've got this transform, and if I move this transform, you can see that we can also manipulate it. I'm going to drop down real quick just to demonstrate. So we can move this around here, left and right, in and out in a way, but I really like to handle that in this transform over here. So yeah, we took the Cartesian to polar, we rotated it 90, and then scaled it out. Okay, so next we have the Dunlop logo. And let me just go and show you the fonts. So here I'm using Arial Black, font size 0.12, modified the position, scooted it over to the right. For this one, same setup, scooted over to the left. All right, so for the Dunlop, we use this Rockwell Extra Bold, font size 0.12, We kept it in the center, but here we did scale it on this first text transform essentially to squash it. So we've I got a bit of a skew on there. We use the transform here to scale it down, and we mirror it horizontally and vertically. Cartesian to polar, rotated essentially -90. And then I'd like to come back here and just kind of show you holding Control and Shift. If I grab these handles, we can compress the text. Or scale it there in that direction. Okay, so we've got the Dunlop logo. Next is the 060 here. So same stuff. Arial Black is the font I used. We've got a transformation here where we flipped it, squashed it a bit, or scaled it, Cartesian to polar, and then transform here to rotate and scale it. And just to show you again how I kind of manipulate this, is this transform here at the end I use to slide it in place on the sidewall, and then holding Control and Shift we can move that up and down. Okay, so once I have my SV Sport Max, I go ahead and I use a blend with Add Linear Dodge to add in the 060. Because this is kind of centered with the 060, I used another transform and rotated it slightly to the left. Then we use another blend with an Add Linear Dodge where we blend in the Dunlop logo. So here we've got basically the make and the model of the tire. All right, so the next section, we add the Dunlop logo. So here I start with a polygon with 4 sides, rotated 45 degrees. Then I made a triangle and I blended them together. I added a transform here on the polygon 1, and holding Shift and moving, I can cut away at that triangle. The blend mode here is important. I've got the square on top, and that is set to subtract. So that is going to subtract from our triangle here and give us this arrow result. So next, we're going to add, and again, the add blend mode does not matter the order, whether it's foreground or background, because it's addition. So here I grabbed a shape node, set it to disk, scaled it down a bit, and then I used the transform here to scale this into place. All right, so next we're going to use a blend with subtract, and in the top we're going to add another circle where we same thing. I just duplicated this shape node and the scale even, and just scaled that down a bit to subtract that section. So next we've got a blend with Add Linear Dodge, and I just duplicated my text from the Dunlop text from earlier. We added a skew here to skew it some more, And then we've got a transform here, placing that logo or placing that D within the center of the circle. Next, I scale it down with the transform 2D. And then I use a splatter circular to throw it out to here. So in the splatter, I've got adjusted the radius. I adjusted the scale. We could do that also with our transform 2D. We've got some rotation here. This ring rotation, this is going to rotate it along the sidewall. So if I grab that, you can see that that's rotating there along the sidewall. And the radius is going to push it up and down, and the ring rotation is going to move it left and right. Okay, so next, I just combine all those together. Okay, so the next thing I did was create the graphic here. So basically, I took this into Photoshop. I used the pen tool to copy this shape here. I made a mask, and then I just brought it into Substance. To bring in a bitmap, we right-click on our package, and we hit Link, Bitmap, then we path to the file, and then that will be in our Resources folder here. On that same note, I also brought in my mesh. So again, right-click on the package, select Link, 3D Scene. That's pretty not the best naming there. And then we just path to our FBX, and then I just drag and drop this into the 3D viewport to load this mesh into the viewport. All right, so we'll drag and drop our bitmap in. I added a levels because I was having an issue here, and we can see it if I just bypass this. Had an issue here where there's some the blacks weren't completely black, and possibly the whites as well. So I grabbed the levels and just crushed those values. Making sure I had pure black and white. So here we did the same as we did for the logo. I use a splatter circular. We can had to rotate, so you can adjust the radius, and that's again going to push it up and down. Some scale, and then there is the pattern rotation, so we can rotate this, you know, if we needed to line it up in a certain way, as well as the ring rotation that I showed previously. So with this in place, I use a mirror grayscale, and then mirror that on the vertical axis, and do it again on the horizontal axis. All right, then we use a blend node with add linear dodge to add that in to our center section. Okay, so from here, this text, if we take a look at our reference, is recessed. And it also has some ribbing in it that radiates from the center. So there's like a bunch of bars, vertical bars or vertical lines within this cutout text. So to do that, I used a linear gradient 3, and I set the tiling to a 2000. I have a levels here so I can basically lessen or magnify this result, but in the end I ended up not doing anything with this levels. Then we run a Cartesian to polar to get the lines to radiate from the center. Now, one thing to note with this, on my linear gradient 3, I have it tiling at 2000, and we can see this ribbing here. But if you notice, when I drop down even to 4K, this detail disappears. And the reason being there just aren't enough pixels to represent that. So you're gonna have to play with this value. If I bring this down to maybe 1500, if I'm at 4K, let's try 1200. There we go. So 1200 will show up in 4K. If I drop this down to 2048, again, that goes away. So maybe try something like 900, 700, and it shows up there. So you're just gonna have to be aware of whatever you assume your final output will be. But for this demonstration, I'm gonna put it back to 8K and the tiling to 2000 to get that nice detail there. Okay, so with this ribbing, we need to blend this in. So we blend it in here with a blend set to add linear dodge. And what we do is we put the ribbing in the foreground, and then in the opacity, we plug in this mask where we want all of our recessed text to be. All right, and the final result is this. And we could even control the intensity here with this opacity. So if I pull this down, that would essentially flatten this detail out. So it's another way to control the ribbing there. Okay. So the next section, I'm adding these little nubs here. So pretty simple. We use a splatter circular. We set a pattern amount, so we can add more or less here. We could do some pattern amount random, and these patterns are pretty random, so just gonna have to play with that. My ring count here, I did a couple, so we could, if we adjust this ring amount, we're gonna get some more rings. Here we go, we've got 3, because of that randomness, we weren't seeing it all. And another thing is, if we notice, this is getting cut out where our recessed text is. So let's set this back to 2. So I have one set of rings here, and then another set of rings with some different settings with the radius pulled in. So I've got some kind of higher rings and some lower rings here. Blend both those rings together with a blend set to add linear dodge. And then we have another blend here where we're piping this into the foreground, and then we are using our mask from over here to mask that out, so none of the nubs end up in the recessed areas. So to do that, we take our mask here and we use an invert grayscale, and then we plug that into the opacity of our blend here. And again, that just knocks out any areas where there would be the recessed text. So the next part is our height control. So I've basically got three heights. I have a base, which is the sidewall itself. I've got the recessed areas, and I have the extruded areas, like the other text here. So first we take a blend, and I'm just using the copy blend mode. And I've got a value here for my low points and a value here for my mid. So with our blend mode, we're going to plug in our mask. And I'm plugging in this one here because instead of this, because I've got this ribbing added there. So we can control our base here. So as we raise this, let's get to a section that we can see kind of height and recessed areas. And I'm just now realizing I'm missing the text there, but we can fix that. So yeah, let's go ahead and take our recessed areas, and as I start to raise these up, we'll see that those recessed areas start to shorten. A little difficult to tell on the 8K. So as I bring this up, this is going to extrude. As I bring it down, it's going to recess. And again, here's just our base. So if I lower that base, it would essentially get rid of that recessed area. And if I raise that, it'll come in and start to cut into our recessed numbers there. Okay, I actually do have the other text over here on a blend because that was working as I raised and lower it. All right, let's get back to 8K. Okay, and then lastly, we have our scale for all of this stuff here. So I after the fact, I did go and add some color and some roughness. Let's undo that. But this control here is going to allow me to, again, just scale the center text or reposition that text. So if we had a different sidewall, which was thicker, and we needed to move that text up, we can move it up or down with this. So I just need to reposition or grab different masks at different points in the chain to get the color and the roughness that I did after the fact. But that's not that big of an issue. Okay, so that's going to do it for the center text. So next we have the inner text. All right, and that's anything that's close to these two beads here, or the inside of the sidewall. So we've got this text, some more text here, and even this text here. So again, if I take this scale and we start to move this, you can see that we can push this up and down. And again, this is like non-destructive. This can be reused on different size tires. And yeah, it's just really nice to have this ability. All right, so it's going to be a lot of more of the same. So we start with the text node here. I format my text and paste it there. We're using Arial. Got a font size of 0.015. We have a transformation here where we flip it, Cartesian to polar, and then a scale to place it. All right, next section is the area underneath the Dunlop. And again, transform, Cartesian to polar, rotate and scale, blend these two together with an add linear dodge. All right, the next section is this text block here. And we have some numbers. This one's a little different, so we'll go through this one a little bit more in detail. So we've got three sections here. We've got the right text, the left text, and the numbers that have an outline. So we'll start with the main numbers. Again, text. But what we do here is we grab an edge detect. So edge detect with almost 0 edge roundness and 1.17 edge width. And yeah, with this edge width, obviously, we can control the width of the edge. So if we need to thicken that or thin it, that's all done there. Okay, then we use this first transform to flip it horizontally and vertically, and Cartesian to polar, and then another to rotate and scale. Okay, so the left text here, we have our text. We are aligning it to the right so that it butts up on this edge. We have a transform to mirror it, Cartesian to polar, and then transform to rotate it around. And here's that right alignment. If we do it left, it's going to align to the left. We've got this here aligned to the right. So same thing for the text on the right. We add our text with the left alignment, transform that flips it, Cartesian to polar, rotate it around to line it up, blend these two together with an add linear dodge, and then blend that in with another add linear dodge. And then we have our scale and rotation kind of final transforms here for any adjustments that we wanted to do with all of it together. So if we needed to rotate it to the left or the right and it all moved together, that's why we added that last transform 2D. So next we blend that in with another blend mode, add linear dodge. Okay, so here we're doing a couple other things as well. So we've got this text over here, pretty standard. We've got our text, transform to flip it, Cartesian to polar, rotate and scale for alignment. Then we add in this this circle here. So to do that, I took a shape, two shapes here, two circles, move them with these transforms left and right, and then we're going to blend those in with another shape, which is just a square. Stretch this out, and once we use this blend, got a blend of max light in here, but add linear dodge would do the same thing. Next, we run an edge detect on it. Then we've got our transform along with Cartesian to polar coordinates here to line that up with our text. Blend that in. We've got that. And then lastly, just this little circle for the E11, same thing. Take a two shapes here, do a subtract, scale it, and use a splatter circular to push it out to there. And we've just got to rotate to align that with the E11. Then we blend this in. That does it for our inner text, but the last thing that we've got here are these rings. So again, simple shape node, two shape nodes. We've got a subtract for a blend, and then a scale here to scale this in and out. Two more shapes, another blend with subtract, a scale to move that in, another blend here with add linear dodge. So we get these two rings. Next, I've got this scale here to scale this in. And then we have these lines here that we're creating with a splatter circular, where we've used the pattern square, made some adjustments here in the scale or in the size of the X and Y. And this will, lengthen or shorten it. Blend those in and add a little blur HQ grayscale to just round those edges a bit. So add this in, and then we have our inner scale control. All right, and then last is our outer. Let's take a look here. The outer, we've got the outer rings and the outer text, and it's not much. So again, got this this block of text over here. So we use a text, Arial font, transform to flip it, Cartesian to polar. And if I didn't explain this before, the flipping is so that it goes, once we use this Cartesian to polar, if I go ahead and reset, that's going to reset everything. Let me try to reset this. Now, I actually just rotated it here. So this is another way. If you write your text normally like this, right, and then we go and read it on the tire, it's upside down. It's basically it's inside out, right? So that's what this second transform is. So if we mirror it horizontally, that's going to flip it left and right, and mirror it vertically, and that puts it right up and down. Okay, so that's just two different ways to do it. You can flip it upside down here or add this there. So Cartesian to polar to wrap it around. And another thing I want to show, and then we have our rotation, right? But another thing I want to show is if we come back to this text here, if I hold Control and Shift, we can still manipulate this. So we can squash this text in more like that, or we can, make it taller like this. So there's many different ways to adjust this, but this definitely comes in handy. So I just wanted to show that. All right, so the next section is this treadwear section, and again the same: text, transform, text, transform, Cartesian, rotate and scale. Blend those two in. We've got that, and then this is literally copied and pasted from the previous circles, only without those little line marks. Okay, so we blend all those together. We add another transform, and again we can just move this stuff down if needed based on our UVs, or again different tire sizes. Okay, so finally here we have our height here combined. We're adding that in as well. And yeah, from this, I drag this out and we place this into a normal Sobel. And that normal Sobel goes into the normal output node. We've got some intensity sliders here for the normal if we needed to crank that up. Okay. Then from this height, we also use a horizon-based ambient occlusion, and we just plug that directly into the AO. Okay, and then next I create a few masks here. So I've got a mask for the recessed text. I have a mask here for the extruded text, and then I have a mask here for all of the text. So I just did a little bit of roughness here. I probably would finish my roughness in something like Painter possibly, but just to run through this, we've got this this kind of base roughness here, and essentially I have three values. One is going to be for the recessed text, one is going to be for the extruded text, and then we blend those together. So if I wanted to change the recessed text to be really glossy, we can do that there. And here is the value basically for the sidewall. I'm sorry, that's not the sidewall. That's the raised text. So if I bring this down, we can make our raised text really shiny or rough. And then down here is my sidewall. So if we wanted to make that sidewall more shiny, and again, independently from the recessed text, we're able to do that there. So we've got our three values. I'll start with the recessed text. So I have the recessed text mask plugged into the opacity. We've got the blend mode set to copy, and then we have the value here piped into the foreground. So exact same thing for the extruded text or the raised text. Raised text mask into opacity, blend mode set to copy, uniform color into the foreground. We blend these two together using an add linear dodge. And then we blend in the background with a copy here, blend set to copy. We've got all of our text here. We're using the mask for all of our text. And we have the first two blends piped into the foreground, and then the value here for the sidewall piped into the background. Okay, so the next thing I do here is I do another blend with add linear dodge and a low opacity, and that's to get in this this ambient occlusion. So if I lower this, we'll see that we have none of that ambient occlusion piped into the roughness. And if I crank that up, we'll see that we're getting some roughness there around the edges. So to do that, we grab our ambient occlusion, we run this through an invert grayscale, and then we are piping this into the foreground. And because this is set to add linear dodge, this is going to be on top. And then we just adjust our opacity slider based on how much of that roughness we want in there. Okay, so next we just throw in some noise. I'm using Gaussian spots, scaled up, maxed out in the scale, and then even scaled up or repeated more here with this transform. Use a blend, add linear dodge, have the spots on top, the previous result into the background, and then I didn't want this to go or affect the recessed areas, so we plug in an invert of our text mask here into the opacity of that channel. Then I'm just layering on some scratches. If we remove that or crank it up, we see that we've got the scratches there. Because this is kind of mid values, so we've got a mid for the background essentially, and we've got some white scratches and black scratches. I'm using the add subtract blend mode, and you'll see that we just get the black and the white from that add sub blend mode. Then we can just dial this back with the opacity and get some subtle scratches in there. Next, just using grunge rust fine here. Copy blend mode. This is placed on top. We've got our previous result piped into the background, and here I'm using our ambient occlusion to mask that section out. And we can crank this up or down. And this really is just to kind of bring in some breakup there. I think this levels adjusts some of this stuff, the ambient occlusion. That might have just been something left over I forgot to get rid of. All right, so here's our final roughness pass here. And then lastly, we've got color. So the color, it's going to be kind of difficult to see, but we have a background color. It's got a little bit of brown in it for our tire. Then we have a black value for our recessed text and a brighter value for our numbers. Okay, and again, here's the final result. But like I said, I'm really grabbing the normal map from this, and I'm gonna bring this into Unreal and do some stuff with the shader in there. Or we could take this and bring it into Painter and progress the roughness and the color textures through there. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to hit me up.